I think, indeed, we do understand that there's a real opposition between two visions of the world with regard to freedom of expression. One, which is unfortunately very widespread, which says that one should limit freedom of speech in order to protect religions, and this is even true in some so-called non-religious countries. And on the other hand, there are democracies which have some nuances as to the limit to be brought to freedom of speech. For example, the American model, the European countries. In France, there are limits which are incitement to racial hatred. This does not mean that you're going to go to prison, but you will get a fine, incitement to violence, or incitement to crimes against humanity. And this is also true for those who negate the extermination of 6 million Jews during the Shoah, during the Holocaust. And so if one tries to impose a limit, there's going to be a banning of this kind of expression, or which leads to the reproduction of crimes of the past. Now, here we do not just have a theoretical debate, but this debate has repercussions, and I agree with my friend Sifawi. This is a limitation to the activities of journalists, not only in certain parts of the world, but even in Europe. I also say that Islamophobia is not just something to protect the Muslims, but it's something which stops people criticizing any religion. I encountered this word for the first time in Durban. I understood that he was an extremist, militant Islamist, and he had come there to Durban only to fight against Islamophobia, and he's also one of the members of a group that is meeting somewhere else today in another venue, and where they only talk about Islamophobia and how to combat it. This word was coined in 2001, Islamophobia, and I think it leads to just as many problems as the term defamation of religion, because it leads to the same limitation of freedom of speech. And I met this word also in a UN report, because Mr. Dudu Dien had written quite a lot of pages about it, and even though there were people who are writing in Charlie Hebdo, which is a publication that writes against all kinds of restrictive practices and anti-racist. Nevertheless, I was called the representative of the greatest threat to the United Nations. First time because I wrote a book about Tariq Ramadan. I've been writing books on all sorts of religious extremists, be they Jewish, be they Christian. I've written quite a few biographies of the Christian extreme right in the United States, for example, Mr. Jerry Falwell and others, and I'm sure Mr. Dudu Dien would never have accused me of being an extremist. But because my book analysed the speeches of Tariq Ramadan, because this book was mentioned in a French journal, Mr. Dudu Dien said in the Express, a French publication, that the great intolerant threat was now in France. And I was also told that the publication of the Danish caricatures in Charlie Hebdo, that this was the second greatest threat to freedom in the world. I was responsible for publishing this, and there were pages and pages written about it in the UN journals. Of course, all these lines have been completely wasted, where these people accuse the 12 drawings to be the greatest threat. And in fact, most people have never seen these 12 drawings. English students have never seen them. American students have never seen them because a lot of publications never showed them because of fear of retaliation or being accused of racism. Now, in Europe as well, there are restrictions to the right to expression. And when people see these caricatures, they think that this is really ridiculous because they expected some absolutely monstrous and extremely hurtful drawings, whereas these are fairly innocuous caricatures. Now, the turban of Muhammad was the one that is the most offensive, that seemed the most offensive. And I recently spoke about this with an ambassador from Algeria. I reminded him that the drawing had been published the first time, not in the Danish journal, but it had been published to denounce the bombs in Algeria, which killed other Algerians in the name of Muhammad. And so the draftsman, the person who had drawn this, was not accused of taking the defense of Islamists. The people were also accused of being anti-Islamic. Now, I wondered whether people were not a little bit, rather than being Islamophobic, they were Christianophobic. And there was someone who was arrested after transporting Bibles. And I asked the Algerian ambassador that what was happening, because people had never been arrested carrying Qurans, but they were arrested carrying Bibles. And so people who are there trying to defend the defamation of religion, but some of them are the worst when it comes to being intolerant towards other religions. For example, Baha'i, people who put up a photo of Jesus Christ in their faculty, they are in danger of being given the death sentence. And sometimes you feel like laughing about this, but it's not a laughing matter. Mr. Doudou Dieng, who mentioned my publication, never spoke about the real situation of the minorities, the Islamic minorities in the world. For example, in China, there is the Uyghur minority. When they were humiliated by Chinese policemen, the Chinese policemen burnt Qurans, the books, the holy books. And this didn't lead to any kind of public accusation. And I asked the Algerian ambassador why it was that nobody said anything about it, and then this big Islamic that this Islamic solidarity did not manifest itself for Uyghurs. And the Uyghurs said that they were oppressed by China, not by Israel or the United States, and therefore nobody was interested in their oppression.